So I really contemplated whether this should be about how our current zoning laws affect and stifle the growth of what would have been a formal rental housing market, and how that, in extension, would have affected or made housing better. Or whether I should have discussed how Nigeria's secondary land market literally doesn't exist. But then I realized that whether the formal rental housing market or the secondary land market, both of them have a common denominator, and they are like two sides of the same coin. And when you solve for one, you will literally solve for the other because they are nested in one another. The secondary land market affects the rental market, and the rental market is a driver or a vehicle for driving the values of the secondary land market. And to give context to how zoning affects the growth or the development of what would have ended up being a formal rental housing market, is how, due to our single use zoning, and what I mean by that is how in most of our areas, in most of our developments, you see this area is fully residential, that area is fully commercial, that area is fully industrial. Whereas if we had allowed a certain level of integration of mixed use in these areas, that would have enabled landlords introduced or incorporated commercial development into their residential planning. And so you see a lot of 1,000 houses, 1,000 unit estates, zero commercial. And the result is this affects cash flow because rent income comes in once a year. Whereas if we had introduced or incorporated commercial into this development, that would have helped a lot of landlords at least maintain continuous cash flow. And this would have helped them attract institutional funding. And with institutional funding, more property owners would have been able to venture into the rental market, which would have improved or increased the supply of rental housing. And we need not go further into the effect of how well that will improve cost of rent or even the quality of housing that Nigerians have. So that is that on one side. And the key consideration in all of this is the problem of cash flow. In other words, debt capital, value in tradable assets that we cannot convert, that we cannot use to improve supply of housing. And on the other side also is the problem with the Nigerian secondary land market. Yes, we have land, a lot of land, yet we can neither capture nor connect the value in these lands as cash flow, as equity, as fundable or bankable assets that then connects as growth, as productivity to owners in the long run. And all of this is due to poor land administration, which does not allow us to quickly capture the value in land and transform it or convert it into economic value for growth or even as cash flow for landowners. And so I don't sound too formal. Just imagine how long it takes and how stressful it is for you to buy land and title it. Or even worse, how long it takes if you decide to flip that land or convert it or sell it back to use that money for something urgent. All of this is due to poor digitization of land assets, which stifles the possibility of owners to convert that land into economic value without unnecessary paperwork, bottlenecks, and office politics. So it was between these two choices, these two alternatives, that I couldn't make a decision until I realized that the common denominator here is the debt capital, the very valuable yet unconvertible value that affects both sides of this conversation. And coming to the realization that if we can solve for the secondary land market, we will also be solving and creating the possibility of actually building and growing a formal rental housing market in Nigeria, one that is strong enough to attract institutional funding and which will help us improve housing conditions and even make cost of rent better and affordable for Nigerians. So let's start with the formal rental housing market, but without overflowing the zoning issue and how it affects flexibility and productivity of development. Let's just take Lekki for example, and how Lekki is slowly turning into commercial zone because most businesses cannot afford the cost of rent of commercial spaces. And how if we had built or developed Lekki as a mixed use zone with more properties having the flexibility of incorporating commercial spaces within them, would have helped a lot of people afford the rent, would have helped a lot of property owners make more money, maintain cash flow on their development, and which would have reduced that sole focus on maximizing potential, on maximizing profit on their residential development. Because there is revenue also coming from another part of this development, which helps businesses afford the cost of their rent. And how at the bottom of all this is really just our inability to capture and connect the value in these assets properly. And this is how it is connected to the problem of the secondary land market, because beyond just the inability of people to easily sell, to easily title, to easily transfer ownership of their land, is also the inability of that land, of that asset, to be traded or converted conveniently without hassle for other financial or economic rewards at any time. And now, to help you see this connection between the secondary land market and the formal rental market, let's have an analogy. And since we're talking about the secondary land market, which can be likened to how you sell second-hand cars, let's use the automobile analogy to describe this perfectly. Let's liken land transaction to how cars are manufactured and sold. And in this case, the manufacturer of the car could be likened to government or original land settlers that own this land originally. And just as before you buy this car from manufacturer, the manufacturer would have had to do series of tests, series of compliance, such as brake tests, sliding tests, crash tests, all as criteria for documentation for roadworthiness, for the car to be road legal. And all of this information is captured and stored in the VIN number, or in this case, the chassis number. And the implication of this is for everyone that transacts, deals, services, manages, owns, insures that car, all of that service history, ownership records, insurance records, crash history is captured, and all of that information is stored in a database that can be retrieved simply by accessing that VIN number. It is such that from anywhere in the world, as long as you have the VIN number, you can access and query that database using the VIN number to check the ownership records, the insurance records, the crash history, the service history of that car, which helps you to make informed decisions whether to buy, to own, to deal, or use that car for whatever purpose you decide to use it for. That is also how, when you buy land either from the family or the government, you also capture the details of the transaction, the location of such property, the size, the dimension, the length and breadth, the exact location, and all the other details that pertains to the history of such property is gathered and captured and recorded as title. And it is in that irony that for cars, whose value keeps depreciating by the day, that we have such robust digital systems that helps us deal or navigate the market in transparency with high accountability, that helps us make informed decisions with confidence and goodness. How much more of land with so much value? How then is it that we do not have such digital structure, that we fail to properly capture, connect, and convert the value in land, and in so doing, making it easy for people, for owners to convert that value and trade it for economic or financial rewards? It is due to this lack of a digital land registry that makes land titling very cumbersome, and which makes it difficult for people to deal with land, to deal and transact in land, and connect even the value of land into financial or economic assets, which generally makes it difficult for everybody or anyone to sell, to auction, to buy, or transact in land. Because we run a very cumbersome system that everyone and anyone that intends to deal in the secondary land market has to manually navigate the processes. You have to manually verify, you have to manually go and check, manually visit, manually check titles, manually check probate, manually do everything from titling to even ownership transfer. And what this does is lock up the value in these assets, lock up the value in land, instead of convert it to instruments that we can layer securitization, that we can layer tokenization to get funds, to get loans that we can use for economic development and growth. But it is also worthy of note and also commendable that some governments, some state governments, even the federal government, has come to the realization that a digital land administration system is now necessary to help us capture and convert the value of these assets into tradable value that will help us not only improve the housing market, but also help us grow and develop the economy. But also at the same time, just as despite the robustness of the automobile digital systems, there is still skepticism around that system. It's also the issue of skepticism about the adoption of a digital land registry, all of which borders around trust and whether the people trust the government enough to believe that all it hopes to achieve with this is only its objectives of truly digitizing and improving land administration, and not whether this will be an ulterior motive to increase taxation or whether it could be an excuse for the government to hijack their properties. But at the end of the day, the benefits outweighs this concern. In that, just as a digital automobile system gives you the confidence, gives you the 360-degree outlook that prevents you against fraud, that helps you make better decision on how to approach your transactions as it relates to that car, that is exactly how a digitized land administration system protects you against fraud, helps us in conflict resolution when it comes to land cycling, when it comes to transfer of ownership, helps us transfer and capture the value in this land and convert it to financial and economic value that can be traded for growth, for economic returns, for property owners, that can be traded as leverage for economic growth, for physical development. The rewards are unlimited. The other side of that skepticism is what is in it for the people. How does an average person, how does an average citizen benefit from this digitization? Because definitely, this digitized process will benefit the rich, will benefit large scale investors, will help them transact and transfer ownership easily, help them convert their assets to liquid, help them solve their cash flow problems. But how does all of this value transfer, this value conversion, translate to the middle class? And with all these positive outcomes, what does it mean to the salary as better rent? How does it connect as better housing, as affordable ownership in the future? And this is the point of this video, that yes, all these positive outcomes justify the need for a digitized land administration systems. However, how does all of this, number one, benefit average people? Number two, influence the development of what would become a formal rental housing market? And number three, solve the debt capital problems for the two sides of either the rental housing market or just the secondary land market itself? And the answer to this, the solution to this, lies in what this digitization achieves. The essence of digitization is data. So basically, digitization becomes a data structure, data infrastructure, on which we then layer income responsive planning. Yes, income responsive planning. This is what connects everything. This is how planning can take the rewards of this digitization, the rewards of this formal rental housing market, the rewards of organic development, and connect it together to better and favor every member of the economy, every member of the society, every resident of the city, such that those that want high value, high yield real estate investments can benefit from the same structure, while those who just want to be able to afford rent, those who just want decent and dignified housing, to also benefit from the reward of all this exercise. Remember the one thing that I've emphasized as the benefit of either the digital automobile framework or even a digitized land administration system is transparency. It is transparency that builds trust. Trust builds confidence for decision makings in matters of urban development, city planning, and even economic or financial decision making. And to show you how this would work, let's take it to the grassroots. So instead of a landowner struggling to develop and build one property or one unit of property, because they now have transparent asset details, which gives the bank or the lender or the investor the confidence to give them finance. Now, this is not just finance, because the confidence that this transparent asset record gives is the one that reduces the risk or the perception of risk around such assets, which gives such investors the confidence to release the funds. So, first of all, apart from this digitized asset unlocking access to finance, it is actually unlocking cheaper finance. What this translates to for such property owner or developer is that they can then build more units, which helps them generate more income, but at lower pressure of cost of capital. And because all this is happening within the same digital record keeping and documentation system, this also transfers the benefits to the renters of that property, such that the renters can build a verified payment record, which equals better credit scoring for future home ownership benefits, should they be interested in the future in seeking or applying for mortgages. And with more people documented, this results in more people being able to access and unlock mortgage or even other finance instruments for future ownership goals. So that is the simplest representation of how the advantages, these positive outcomes of digitized land administration trickles down into affordable housing or affordable ownership for average citizens. But then remember that the most important element of this digitization is that it then becomes data infrastructure for city planning. And also bearing in mind that what we attributed as the cause for this cash flow problem in what would have been the former rental housing market is single-use zoning. So when we have data, this gives us better context into the socio-economic character of the city. For example, these data will show us the kind and caliber of people that own properties in certain areas within the city. instead of just applying blanket zoning principles or zoning standards or even blindly accommodating mixed use haphazardly. What this data will help us achieve is then apply zoning according to each area's socio-economic character, such that if this area requires, based on the caliber of people, requires bigger setbacks because it helps them drive property value, then we plan such areas for higher setbacks. While for other areas that the data suggests requires higher density use or flexible zoning use, we then plan such areas and zone it accordingly. And here is the advantage or how that benefits the formal rental housing market. In that, one, all of this is happening within a digitized record keeping and documentation system. Two, with better data to inform zoning, to inform planning decisions, we can better accommodate mixed use zoning that then helps landowners, property owners, and landlords to maximize the development potentials of their property, the value of which is properly documented, captured, and converted for growth and economic development for the city. So, with better context rich data, we can then smartly incorporate density, smartly use setbacks, and even smartly allow pocket-friendly land ownership, such that people can then own land in smaller sizes as it fits their income and realities, without fear of abuse, without fear of loss of revenue, without fear of low compliance, simply because the city now operates a digitized and by so smarter land administration system. So just imagine that instead of a developer building 3 semi-detached units on a plot, they now get the flexibility to build as much as 6 floors, out of which 2 can be commercial and the remaining 4 for residential. The confidence in the revenue generated from the sales of such residences and also the guarantee of cash flow on the commercial spaces reduces the pressure of maximum profit on the residential units. So on the back end, property owners unlock access to finance, while on the front end, income doesn't only come from an outright sale or annual rent, but also from the commercial spaces that generate constant cash flow. And the result of all this in the long run is 1, the secondary land market thrives. 2, we build and develop and grow a formal rental housing market that is self-sustaining enough to attract institutional funds, and which by extension, 3, improves housing supply, which simultaneously improves the quality of housing, improves access to mortgages, reduces the cost of ownership, and even reduces the cost of housing on renters. And I can go on and on with all the benefits of a digitized land administration system and how its outcomes trickle down to different sectors within the building and construction and real estate environment. But let's wrap this up and conclude with the fact that, yes, the government's decision to proceed with land digitization is in good order. Yet, it is important that we, the people, support this initiative as the rewards benefit us more. Don't forget that despite operating a non-functional land registry system, the real estate and housing industry contributes 13% GDP. So yes, the government stands to gain, but this initiative benefits the people more. And it is in light of this that it is important that we support the government to drive the success of this initiative. The earlier we comply and support, the faster the results of this exercise, this initiative, will trickle down to average citizens. Land connects everyone, from renters to developers to government to banks to investors. Land is the common denominator for everybody. And the better we can capture the value in this land and connect it as economic rewards, as growth driver, and as an instrument for economic development, the better our cities will be for it, the better the quality of life of the people, and the happier the citizens will be. I hope this helps.